Welcome to the Night Pod Cometh, a podcast covering the FXX show. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I'm Jamie G, Esquire the Fifth, MD, Master of Surgical Arts. I'm here with my co-host, the main man, Magnum Mills. That's 4 M's if you're keeping track. And we're going to drink some green paint and break down another great episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia from season 11. Charlie catches a leprechaun. Cheers to you, Magnum Mills.
And to you. And to you out there. Thanks for checking us out on YouTube, listen to the podcast, whatever. We're going to get the details out of the way, dive right into this thing, drink the paint. And this is, again, season 11, episode 8, called Charlie Catches a Leprechaun. It originally aired on February 24th, 2016. It was directed by Heath Collins, who has directed 10 episodes of Sunny, the most recent being The Janitor Always Mops Twice in season 14. The episode was written by John Silverman and Josh Silverman. This is the only episode of Sunny that they have written, and it's guest starring Kevin Thompson as the little man / leprechaun. The plot synopsis here is Dennis tries to create an innovative mobile Paddys pub experience, but runs into trouble when customers refuse to cooperate, while Charlie and Mac attempt to catch a thieving leprechaun.
Oh, and what an attempt they make. Magnum Mills, right before we get down to it, are there any notable callbacks, appearances, or other fun facts about this episode of Sunny that we should be talking about? And oh, by the way, spoiler alert, people. If you are listening to this podcast, hopefully you've subscribed already. If you haven't, do it right now. We are going to spoil the ever-loving shit out of this episode. We're going to talk about all the deets, baby. Good, bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, and we're literally going to talk about all episodes of Sunny here. So if you randomly decide to start with this one, you made a good choice. But we're going to spoil a few things, maybe not super directly, but in right away, we have a pretty notable callback where Dennis gets frustrated in the opening. He says, "All right, everybody get a flute." And that kind of mirrors that everybody get a weapon scene from season 2 in the episode The Gang Goes Jihad. And when Dennis is giving his presentation, Mac asks where the easel is. We've actually seen the easel a couple of times before. It was used in presentations and episodes like The Dennis System and Reynolds versus Reynolds, a serial defense. Dee's crazy Patty character has showed up before. He was also featured in America's Next Top Patty's Billboard Model Contest. Shout out Rex. And Mac and Dennis buy a timeshare. And you see in the episode, Dennis puts up a QR code on his tablet. And if you actually took a picture of that, went to it back in the day, it would take you directly to the FX website. Dee spends a lot of time in the episode talking about how they should just be doing a car service. And eventually Dennis claims that they should have just been doing a car service, won't acknowledge that it was Dee's idea. This is similar to the argument over who came up with the big steak scam in the episode Charlie Work. And then finally, the scene in the basement where Charlie is about to start torturing the supposed leprechaun, set to Stuck in the Middle with You, is a direct reference to the Quentin Tarantino film, Reservoir Dogs.
Man, was it a great one, Magnum Mills. Now it is time to start breaking down this fantastic episode. We're going to just go through the whole thing in chronological order. Right, Magnum Mills? Starting with...
It's 10 a.m. on the day before St. Patty's Day. At Patty's, Dennis gives the game an innovative presentation, and by that it means he doesn't use the easel or the projector. He just uses the tablet regarding their business plan for St. Patrick's Day. They're in trouble because while St. Patrick's Day has been their most profitable day, profits have been steadily declining for 10 years. So Dennis pitches them on the Paddys Wagon, which is basically a mobile version of Paddy's Pub. The gang argues about whether or not St. Patrick himself was a diddler, and then Charlie heads down to the basement to set his glue traps to catch a leprechaun. And, then we go to the intro after that. That's the cold open. Jamie G, any thoughts on the cold open?
I actually really enjoyed the cold open. I thought this one worked really well. You've got Dennis super focused, got the innovation bug up his sleeve. He's trying to get the pitch down. The gang's talking about. I just thought this was classic Sunny soft opening. Really liked it, and it sets up a. I thought it was pretty cool for Charlie to set his traps to catch the leprechaun. I thought this was a great soft open.
Yeah, Charlie's very ingenious when he needs to be. I kind of like that they did, from a writing standpoint, they set stuff up early on. Frank is worried about Dennis is worried about how Frank is always tired. Frank gives a great line oh, no, don't worry. I slept 26 hours last night. but it actually kind of ties into the end of the episode because Frank falls asleep when he steals the Paddys Wagon and crashes it. And it could also tie into the episode from earlier this season, being Frank when he goes to the hospital and you see the doctor trying to, tell him that something's wrong or whatever. And Frank just kind of, gives him the Heisman and takes off. Maybe once upon a time, was there going to be a little bit of a storyline here where something happened to Frank? I don't know. But after watching certain shows that have initials like PB, I get a little scared about, when doctors are trying to tell you something and you brush them off.
100%. And just a perfect segue for a little shameless plug, and that is the Peaky Blinders podcast, PBP. Me and Magnum Mills are doing that one right now, season 6 of the hit show Peaky Blinders. Make sure you check that out. Available on all your favorite streaming options. Magnum Mills, the next scene after the intro, we see that Dennis has actually procured a Paddys Wagon, which is basically a standard package delivery type truck, which he has painted himself. Dennis tries to explain his overly complicated payment system to Frank, who doesn't get it and thinks they should just take cash. Dee comes out of the bar dressed as Crazy Patty. Dennis is worried that she will offend some customers, but Frank says not to worry. He's got his piece on him, and he flashes his gun. Dennis tells them no guns, no costumes, because he's got this. Dennis assigns their roles. Frank is the driver, Dee will be the bartender, and he will provide the experience. They hop in the wagon and head off in search of their first customers.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. Like we said, we've seen, Crazy Patty before. It kind of weird, like Dennis did such a shitty job with the paint job, but he went out of his way to do like the green lights and the cool horn and everything. Like, I'm not sure, like, I feel like the level of effort here is, a bit inconsistent. I thought Dee had a great line there when it's like, people want clownery into embrace the Irish stereotypes. I think that calls back to, it wasn't my quote of the episode. There's a quote right in the beginning where Max said something like, if we want to make money, we need to honor ancient Irish traditions, like serving an irresponsible amount of booze to people who are genetically predisposed to having alcohol problems. St. Patrick started that tradition, and that's why we celebrate him today. So I think that's kind of like, the through line into there with the Crazy Patty. And also, I think, does Dennis deliberately want this plan to fail? Because he makes 2 bad decisions. He puts Frank as the driver. We know Frank can't drive. He can't drive his own Cadillac, even with Charlie's tapes and everything. And then B, he assigns Dee to be the main person to interact with the customers, basically. Like, I'm just wondering, is there something a little bit more to this plan by Dennis? Is it not just about making more money on St. Paddy's Day? Or is he trying to do something else with this tablet and getting all this personal information and stuff? I don't know. I'm just saying.
It wouldn't surprise me with Dennis with being able to get
why would you have Frank drive? That's very important here. And everybody knows, like Dennis has told Frank multiple times, he would never let Frank drive the Range Rover.
He could never drive that. And that car's that's a finisher, and he could never drive that.
Yeah, it is a finishing car.
Magnum Mills, one thing I loved about this is it sets the tone for what we get out of Dee this entire episode. And this is one of Dee's better episodes, in my opinion. She is fantastic in this, doing all her different personalities here. And yes, they're all offensive, and yes, they're all stereotyping, Irish people, but this is just classic Sunny style, isn't it? The satire here is just fantastic. They're basically taking something like St. Patrick's Day, pointing out the absolutely, the ludicrous, just the reality around it, and then making fun of it, but doing it in a way that's just typical Sunny. Big fan of it.
Yeah, they give Caitlin Olsen the whole thing here. She gets to do her physical comedy. She gets to do the accents of ridiculous characters, and Dee gets to be right for once. Like the whole time, she's just basically like, let's just do the rideshare thing or whatever, and like at the end of the day, everyone's like, yeah, you probably should have just done the rideshare thing or whatever. So
I gotta say,
right. And honestly, like for once, the joke's not on Dee.
It's not on Dee. And I gotta say, Frank, the only thing he does well as a driver is just very casually call D a bitch with just a soft-spoken bitch, not a goddamn bitch like Dennis does.
Well, we've seen
but a
Frank
soft-spoken
actually
bitch.
drive well from the front seat before, but it was when he was the limo driver and he offered to, present an egg to, a lady in a trying time. So
Right. And I think
apparently
that was
Frank
the
can
one
only drive when he's the chauffeur, but we do see him, drive poorly enough that he is blamed for, is it him? Is it D? Why is the beer all foam? Is it because they didn't just run the keg off first? I don't know. It does not seem that there was a lot of thought put into the alcohol in the Paddys Wagon, because to me, it looks like there is just one half keg in there and that's all they have.
not going to be enough to fulfill the dreams.
Yep. So let's go back to Paddys real quick then. And we see Charlie come in, and he took something away from their opening conversation because he comes in with a can of green paint and a snake. Mac likes the snake, obviously, but he's not too sure about Charlie's plan to use the green paint to color the beer green. Charlie thinks it'll be fine, and we see that he's actually been drinking paint himself. Mac thinks that is disgusting, and Mac is like really disgusted about this, but Charlie does not think it's a big deal. Despite the rest of the gang having told him not to try to catch a leprechaun this year, Charlie heads back down to the basement to check his glue traps.
Magnum Mills, I gotta say, this is just, again, Charlie's just awesome in this episode, and the chemistry between him and Mac. I like a Charlie Mac combo, and it really works well here. And he comes in and one of my favorite lines. It wasn't my quote of my favorite quote, but it might be a runner up. It's up there. It's when he comes in and he's like, I don't remember everything about the St. Patrick's Day talk, but I remember snakes were involved. And he's he's got just a bag full of
bag. Like a fucking ShopRite bag or an Acme bag or something.
Yeah, and again, Charlie's pretty crazy with the chems, dude. He gets down with the chemicals. He likes to huff. He likes to drink paint, and I just, it's just so funny because when he finally shows him his tongue and it's just green, it's just great. I really, really enjoyed
that
those
was
two in this scene.
that whole fucking exchange where Charlie's trying to go down to the basement, and it's something like, Mac tells him to stop drinking paint. And Charlie's like, "Oh, I will." And Mac's like, "Well, you say that, but I don't think you're gonna stop." And Charlie's like, "I hear you. It's a frustrating thing, right?" It's like the guy doesn't listen, and he starts walking away. And there's another part of the conversation where Mac asks something about the paint, and he's like, "Well, I'm not like drinking paint. It's like eating a beer. Like, when's the last time you ate a beer?"
You don't eat them, you drink them.
I mean, that's like an oatmeal stout or something. I mean, it's been I don't know, a couple of weeks. I've ate a beer, but it's been a while.
Yeah, it's some thick ones, dude. Some thick ones. Still, the one thing I like about this Magnum Mills is I continue to be, when I first watched this episode, and this was not my first watch of this, obviously, but I continued to be intrigued by Charlie heading to the basement. Just Charlie heading to the basement is intriguing for me because he does crazy shit down there, but particularly to check the glue traps. This is an intriguing thing from the viewer standpoint. It just is.
Especially homemade glue traps with apparently homemade glue and like cookie sheets. Charlie, I honestly though, I've never tried to catch a leprechaun, so I don't know if I'm going to pace to really offer real criticism. Jamie G, have you ever successfully or unsuccessfully attempted to capture a leprechaun?
Well, yeah, you would capture it. You wouldn't trap it, or kidnap it rather. I have not, Magnum Mills, successfully done it. Have I tried? I have.
I quit after like 26, 28 boxes of Lucky Charms. I could never, it just never worked out for me. But that brings us to the Paddys Wagon. And Paddys Wagon is out on the outskirts of Philadelphia. Dennis turns down a couple older types, but he managed to hustle a couple, younger, good-looking dudes into the wagon as their first customers. Dee has now turned her crazy Patty costume into a new fighting Irish type of character. And Dennis assures confused customers that they are not some sort of bang bus, and everybody finally gets into the wagon.
Yeah.
How do you feel about this as as a startup company here? Because this is a startup. This is their first customers as a startup. How do they do?
I mean, when your customer thinks you're a bang bus, I think you're struggling a little bit. I mean,
I thought that was a positive.
They'd have to embrace it. I mean,
for their age group, they were in the demographic.
That's true.
They're 18 to 37, dude. They wanted to be a bang bus. I think they were disappointed when they found out it was not. But I mean, did they want to bang Dennis? Did they want to bang D as the fighting Irish? I mean,
or both, I mean, and
Maybe
if you
at the same
combine
time.
if you
That would be
combine
the true
beer
bang
and
bus,
banging,
right?
yes, a beer bang bus would be great, man.
And Frank
Beer
does look like the
bang
kind of
bong.
guy who would be driving a bang bus.
Bro, how about a beer bang bong bus where you just bang and do beer bongs? I mean, anyways, we could plot about this from a marketing
The actual
standpoint.
idea is not bad. If you had an Uber bus type of deal where I could have a beer on the bus, if there was the option against a no beer bus, I would take the beer bus. But
you'd pay the upcharge for the beer
yeah,
bus.
they're just, marketing is really doing a poor job here. I mean,
They really are.
They should have figured this out after the Paddys Bucks went under.
Yes. They tried to stimulate their own economy. It just didn't work.
Yeah, and then Frank Fluids and Boca Raton and
Wolf Cola. Magnum Mills, this was a good one. I like Dee with the characters. They really let her have it. And each scene she's in, essentially, you almost get a different character here while they're out doing the Paddys Wagon bit. So again, Dee, she shined.
Again, I loved when she was right behind Dennis doing the kind of almost trying to do the fighting Irish thing. I will say that the one actor, when he's like, "Oh, can you take us to Center City?" It was like the least no one in the history of Philadelphia has ever said Center City. So just minor nitpick there. It also did love the line of when Dee shows Dennis her new costume. Dennis is like, "You didn't do anything. You just created another offensive Irish stereotype."
But and then she simply responds, "But that's what Irish people do.
Yeah, that's what they are,
drink and they fight."
She's like, "What?"
It's just so
good.
I'm
doing my fists in the various.
Yes, if you could see Magnum Mills right now, he's doing his best. You could be on the
fist
side of a
Popeye,
golden helmet.
I make myself old by talking about Popeye. But
You're a golden domer, dude. Notre Dame right there.
Take us
fighting
inside the paddy wagon, Jamie G.
So once we get inside the wagon, Magnum Mills, Frank isn't proving to be a great choice as driver. Surprise, surprise. And Dennis cannot get his complicated payment system to work on his tablet that involves scanning a QR code, downloading an app, logging into Facebook, and watching a video. Tricky, tricky, tricky business. Finally, Dennis gives up and offers the customers a free beer. Unfortunately, the beer is almost all foam due to Frank's driving and Dee's ineptitude. Finally, the customers has had enough. They ask Dennis to stop the wagon and let them out and figure out the doors are locked. Not real great to find out you're trapped. When they threaten to call the cops, Dennis pulls Frank's gun on them. So Dennis, the one that says no guns, is literally the first one to pull the gun.
Yeah, when you kind of almost do again, it was literally Chekhov's gun in the first act when Dennis takes it from Frank, puts it away. And we see this episode that Dennis, he's got his finger on the trigger a couple of times here and gets a little bit comfortable with it. I will say, I mean, overall, I think this is a pretty good takedown of what it's like now when you try to buy something or set up a reservation or go somewhere new. You get basically two options. Either you give Google more control, like register with your Google account or your Facebook account or something, or you have to create an entire another new account. Like you can't just be like, "I'd like a reservation, give it to me for MM at 7:30 or whatever." No, they need to know your email address. Like, do you have any pets? It's kind of ridiculous. So I think this is one of those things that could be a little bit clunky, but you could see, especially in this day and age where there's more niche shit like this and pop-ups or whatever, that being the kind of thing. There's even companies now that, basically they make their money off your information.
Absolutely. And there's companies that make their money off selling your information. Have for a while, Magnum Mills. The next scene, we get the Paddys Wagon, and this time it's pulling over to the side of the road somewhere outside of the city. Dennis forces the customers out at gunpoint, taking their wallets and their cell phones. He assures them that they are not thieves and they will mail everything back to them. They just can't have them going to the cops. Classic Dennis. Dennis, Dee, and Frank climb back into the wagon and leave the customers stranded in the middle of nowhere. As they drive away, they convince themselves that they've given these customers an authentic St. Paddy's Day experience. I mean, this is it's Dennis to a T, right? He somehow convinces himself, so they did get an authentic St. Paddy's Day experience. I mean, it's fantastic. And I got to say, I do like that Dennis, he's a man of principle and he will mail everything back.
Yeah. I mean, in this whole time, really, I thought one thing we didn't quite point out is that they deliberately made Dennis have, I believe it's a Microsoft tablet and not in an iPad, I don't know if they did that just because, or if it's a commentary, or because eventually we know Rob McElhenney done a show Mythic Quest for Apple TV, which is absolutely great. And I felt for those customer dudes, like the one dude who was like, yeah, dude, I just wanted beer. I don't want you to have all my personal information. Like, I thought they did pretty good. And the only thing we didn't touch on is that little bit of exchange where D's talking to the guys and, they're like, shut up, D, shut up, D. And Frank's like, keep it light, bitch. When they're trying to keep the customers involved, Dennis is on this thing. And, then again, right there at the end of the thing, they're kind of dropping them off or whatever, and there's a decent sense of irony that they've been basically, all they're doing is imprisoning people inside a paddy wagon.
It's great irony, and I will say I did enjoy as they're stepping outside and they're figuring out what they have to do with these people, and they realize, they come to the conclusion, well, shit, we got to take everything. And so I
thought, apologetic. It's like they could see that, like, they just figured it out, like, oh, we didn't plan this, but yep. And it's funny to see how that evolves to the end of the episode, where then they just by default it only took 3 times. This was the first time, one more time, and then after that the default was just like, bring you out to the fucking country and rob you.
Fantastic, Magnum Mills. We finally get back to Paddys. Mac is struggling to serve all the customers, and Charlie is nowhere in sight. As the customer is telling Mac that his wallet was stolen, Charlie dashes up the bar and tells Mac that he has come down to the basement with him. He must. Mac tells the customers that they are now on the Irish honor system, and they need to serve their own drinks and leave the cash in a bucket. The crowd cheers as they apparently really like the Irish honor system, Magnum Mills. It sounds like a good time.
I think I would like the Irish honor system too. I mean, I think the Irish to English translation is they hear Irish honor system and they hear free beer. But
yes, it's right up there with the Irish goodbye. But I think Irish honor system is probably better.
Charlie said, he didn't think the Irish honor system was a thing. And Mac's exact quote, I believe, was, "Oh, it's a thing. It's an ancient Irish tradition. Know your history, bro."
You got to know your history, man. Hey, Mac really is all in on his Irish Catholic roots. Always has been.
Oh yeah, until he's was he Belgian? Like, when do they fake him out? That is good. Like,
yeah, they tell him he's Dutch. Anyways,
yeah, he's Dutch. I'm Dutch.
Tune into a Night Pod Cometh, and we'll share with you. We did all of season 15, and you can check all that stuff out right here on the Night Pod Cometh. But Magnum Mills, 2 interesting things happen here. One, Mac is being told that the wallet is stolen, where they're literally planting the seeds for the what happens down the road here with the leprechaun.
Right.
We get the bar being actually busy, bro. They could have made some money tonight.
See, I think that's even less busy, and I think they make it a point a little bit. Like, we've seen it like packed to the gills before. It's not quite that packed. But on the other hand, when you're only paying one, no, they're not paying any other people to work, so their overhead has to be pretty low. With the Irish honor system, for what it's worth, being established, we move down into the basement, and Mac sees that Charlie has caught what he thinks to be is a leprechaun. Mac just thinks that he's kidnapped a little person. After arguing who is right, Mac asks the captured figure a direct question. Are you now, or have you ever been, a leprechaun? The little person stuck in the glue trap replies that they are not a goddamn leprechaun. He seems to have an answer for all their questions, but Charlie is still not convinced. Mac suggests roughing him up a bit to get more information. Mac tells Charlie to get the snake.
Absolutely hilarious. Charlie's comfort level here with doing whatever it takes to figure out how they're going to get that pot of gold. This is hilarious, dude. The whole thing. The guy literally stuck to the mat. I mean, fantastic. I really enjoyed his work. It was really believable as he's trying to get himself off and he's completely stuck. Thought that was great. And I just love the dialogue here between Charlie and Mac. Again, this is Charlie and Mac. They're really hitting hard here on this episode, man.
Well, this is upper tier Charlie and Mac right here. Like, when they're talking about it and Mac's like, oh, he's trying to tell Charlie that he captured a little person on a leprechaun. Charlie says, like, oh, well, you wouldn't say I kidnapped Bigfoot, right? You'd say I captured Bigfoot. And then Charlie drops a line, which is, every once in a while, Charlie says something that, like, he really shouldn't realistically be capable of saying. In this case, he says, like, because the door was locked. So he's asking Mac, well, how did he get down here then if the door was locked? And Charlie's exact quote is, So unless he's a being who's unrestrained by the laws of the physical world, he's not getting down here, man. Like, since when does Charlie say unrestrained by the laws of the physical world? And I don't even care because it's so fucking perfect.
He's fantastic. I mean, Charlie just crushes in this. That's a great line. And I love how he slowly convinces Mac. And really what did it was the pot of gold. And very, very cool.
Oh, and then when like they finally think, oh, it might be a thing, and then Mac real quick is like, I wish I could live forever. And then Charlie's like, I wish you don't live forever. And then Mac's like, no, why'd you do that? And Charlie's like, why did you do that? And Mac's like, well, why didn't you say, I wish I could live with you forever? And he's like, Charlie's like, live forever with you? That is just like the way Charlie Day says, live forever with you. Like, the fact that he would rather die than have to live with Mac forever is just, I mean, just fucking perfect.
And one thing that we see here with Get the Snake, that comes back in later, and it's absolutely fucking hilarious. Very, very, like when they did.
And realistic too.
Very realistic, but it was just so funny. Get the snake. And that comes back later, which I thought was cool. That was an outstanding scene, Magnum Mills, in my opinion, one of the best of the episode, but it doesn't end there. Oh no, oh no, oh no. Next, we go back to the Paddys Wagon. We see that they have some new customers. This time, a pair of ladies. Dennis and Frank talk about how it'll be different with this group, especially because they are physically weaker. Typical. The ladies can hear them talking. Dee has switched to playing yet another character. This time, she's some sort of drunken, beaten Irish lady. She's sitting with them and talking to the customers, making them even more uncomfortable. Dennis and Dee begin to argue, and the customers ask to be let out. Dennis says that he will not let them out until they get his full experience. Dennis still can't get his tablet to work, and he offers to let the ladies out if he can take a couple of pictures of them for his Paddys website. As he snaps the photos, Dennis berates them, asking them to smile and show more cleavage. The women begin to break down and sob with fear, which does not make Dennis happy. Once again, they drive out into the country, force the customers from the van at gunpoint, take their phones and wallets, and leave them stranded.
I believe that is the business plan of the Paddy Wagon at this point. You've done it 100% of the time, so
and it's working.
It's right up there when Dennis is telling Dee with all her characters and everything, and he's so far out there. He's like, I can't tell if you're doing a thing now or if this is just who you've become. And it's just so great.
Well, she was really good. Like,
her accent did have a little bit of pirate. He's like, "What are you, a pirate?" And like her Irish accent literally had pirate in it.
She went there, but first it started with like she was like Middle Earth, like north of the Wall, and then she went. Then she went to like
the Hobbit combined with Game of Thrones, and then
it was like Pirates of the Caribbean's of the Game of the Thrones, and it was like a combo platter, but it was so good. If you look at the little detail,
like that's her. Over the top is her shtick, and she's so good at it.
Her makeup in this with the bloody eyes and the bruising. I mean, it's just she's really good. Again,
and I will say the one thing, I'm not sure where she's getting all her wardrobe changes from. I'm just gonna say it's the same place over in like the gang hits the slopes where Charlie was just getting the Coors Lights from nowhere. That's where just Dee's getting her clothes from. That's just what I'm going to assume because
absolutely.
Or from Ziggy. They made the deal with Ziggy or whatever. Ziggy's going to him.
I will say, Magnum Mills, I'm a huge fan of all things Dennis. I've said it multiple times on the show. I fucking love Dennis. It was a little creepy for me with the pictures. Like it worked so well because they're crying and they're in fear. And it's like, oh my God, it looked like it was a freaking, like a kidnapping situation. But he definitely creeps it up big time.
The way Howerton like smiles at them when they're cowering in fear. And dude, he's so good at it that it's creepy. Like
it's very creepy and uncomfortable.
It's super, especially because we know who Dennis is, and just the way it's like him. He's literally looking at them like predator looking at prey, and it's I think they play that off at the end when they drop them off in the country in the middle of nowhere, and you're driving away through the back. You see the girls just get hug each other because they're so happy that they survived.
Yeah,
like this is, you remember Dennis was supposed to set up this streamlined great experience, and now people are literally just happy if they survive
it. And it's quite an experience. Again, a lot of a lot of hidden meaning humor here. I think the gang does such a good job of this. I thought the Paddys Wagon was a good kind of storyline. It's weird to see, Dynasty and Frank in this setting where Frank is, again, my only real grief here is he's a bit underused. Not a bit, let's call it what it is.
Yeah,
he's underused. He's underused in this episode.
And again, this is an episode that doesn't really, the problem is, for the most part, if you want to do anything that's not a bottle episode, that's too many people to involve. You already have 5 members of the gang here. And I just want to say the one thing before, we get out of this scene. Dennis has a line here that was right up there for the top for me because it's kind of a throw off when he's trying to take the pictures, like you said. And, they're like, oh, we don't want to end up on your weird website. He's like, well, if you don't comply, you're going to end up on the weird one. Like implying that he's on the dark web or something, doing some ill, it definitely adds a little bit of fuel to the fire of A, Dennis being, a sexual predator, and B, maybe he has a more sinister agenda the whole time throughout this episode.
Absolutely. Maybe he does. And maybe he does in a lot of episodes. After that scene, Magnum Mills, we move back to the basement of Paddys, and Mac and Charlie are unsuccessfully trying to torture their captive. Charlie says if he would just admit that he's a leprechaun, this would all be over and they could let him go. The prisoner does just that, and he tells them that they will never get his lucky charms and his pot of gold. It's at the end of the rainbow. Mac and Charlie are now convinced that he's a leprechaun, but they still won't let him go. Mac decides to go investigate a gay bar down on Locust Street called The Rainbow to see if the pot of the gold is there. As Mac leaves, Charlie tells the leprechaun that he knows that he's lying and that there's no pot of gold at the gay bar. Charlie pulls out the hammer and menacingly approaches him. I just love Mac here, Magnum Mills, being like, alone. I'm going to go alone.
3 times it drops. He says alone, like very, very specifically, 3 separate times. And again, this is at the point where I think they were trying to move to a place where they're maybe going to embrace the Mac is gay storyline. And they really make it clear here, which you will see later when he somehow comes back home in a green undershirt covered in glitter with his hair done better after having, sorted through the towel closet. So
yes, he did. And what do you need a towel for? I would love to answer all your questions, but there's no time, Magnum Mills.
Right, and then that little, like the initial torture scene where Charlie's beating him with a dead snake and kind of just rubbing on his head, and Mac just literally letting a hose drip on him. And the dude, it's just like, that seems very like uncomfortable, but not really torture. It's just like, I'm very annoyed. Can you people please stop doing this to me now?
Dude, I thought this was so funny where it's just basically a drip. The hose is just, there's no water pressure. The snake is dead. I mean, this scene was so funny. And again, it picks right back up from the last time where Charlie's like, get the snake. Charlie and Mac in the basement were absolutely fantastic this entire episode, paired up, but particularly in the basement. And, when you listen to the gang, their podcast, where they're talking about, they're rewatching their episodes and talking about them. They talk about it at the beginning. They didn't ever plan on just making Mac gay. It just kind of organically happened. And that's what's pretty freaking cool about it. And I think they've gotten to a part here in season 11 where they kind of knew where they were going and they're able to lean in here a little bit. It works great. It works absolutely great.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. And again, that's when your show runs, especially not only for this many seasons, but over this long of a period of time, you're going to have to pivot and change stuff up. And I think maybe one of the first times where it seems Mac is actively almost admitting to himself that he's gay. But either way, it really works. And that brings us back to the Paddys Wagon for, the final set of customers here. And we come to the Paddys Wagon. It's just parked. We're looking at the back bumper. You got Dennis, Dee, Frank. They're just sitting there on the back bumper having a beer. They talk about they have not made any money from customers today. And in fact, they've lost money when they factor in what they spent on gas. They sigh, kind of get up, open the door. We see once again they have a group of customers inside, but they haven't gotten any money from or anything. Dennis comments that, oh yeah, they didn't even bother to try to sell these people beer. And they force them to get out, rob them of their wallets and their phones at gunpoint, leave them stranded in the city. And as they drive away, Frank first tricks Dee into leaving by telling her to check a loose gas cap. And then about, 100 yards down the road later, he tricks Dennis to get out by checking a loose gas cap. He leaves them stranded off is he goes to pivot the business, and we see Dennis kind of just sheepishly wave at Dee as they're both stranded out in the middle of nowhere.
This is Frank's best part of this episode, in my opinion. I mean, don't get me wrong, I loved him, gently calling Dee a bitch throughout the episode, but it was really good here when he first gets Dee, and then Dennis comes in and he's like, man, that bitch was dragging us down. It's so great, they're celebrating it, and then he immediately goes back to the same thing with the gas cap and Dennis falls for it. I mean, really well done here. Thought that was funny. Definitely Frank's best scene.
And I think the highlight for me is the idea that they this is what the gang does. Like, Dennis kind of put in this effort, at least, he tried, whether it was to make money or to find women for him to creep on. He tried. Like, he actually tried. And they gave up after 2 times from what we see. Like, they made 2 runs at it. They gave up to the point they picked up people and they didn't even think about it. They just drove them out to the middle of nowhere, sat around having beers, and then robbed them at gunpoint. Like, that was the most natural thing ever.
Yeah, it's
that's why we love them.
That's why we love them. They're terrible human beings.
That is literally when he's just like, oh yeah, we didn't even try to sell you beer, did we? It's just, it never even occurred to them. They were just, by that point, if it doesn't work twice,
they created a habit. Yeah, they created a habit. Magnum Mills, I gotta admit, huge fan of the Reservoir Dogs scene here. With him, stuck in the middle with you playing, Charlie doing his best. Was it Mr. White? I know it wasn't Mr. Pipel, because Mr. Pipel was on another job. I think it was Mr. White. Anywho, does his great impression there. And one of my favorite scenes, if not my favorite scene in the episode. And he's all painted out, dude. He's got the green paint everywhere. Clearly hard on the paint here. And he's all in, man. He's all in on the torture scene.
Middle with you. Yeah, I mean, again, I kind of half jokingly said that they didn't do this episode until now because they need to have enough money to get the song to do it properly. But yeah, dude, it is just so good to see. Charlie Day is obviously great. We talked about the guy who plays, the little man / leprechaun at the beginning. He actually does fantastic in this. They don't give him a lot to work with, but he really does, he does it all with it. You really buy the whole time. And even at the end, I can make the argument that he really was a leprechaun the whole time. He plays it both ways well enough. I could buy it. One of my favorite parts of the episode is, you think it's the Reservoir Dogs thing. And Charlie, he walks up to the tied up leprechaun in a chair, and he's got a razor out. And he asks him, let's see if you bleed green. He's not actually really fucking with the leprechaun guy. This is just what Philadelphia Eagles fans do to each other. Like, if you want to make sure, you really like go birds, you have to let somebody, slit you a little bit with a razor blade and make sure you bleed green.
Fanhood at its best. And as
a guy who's like, yeah, you must jump through flaming tables. So we all have our own purity tests.
Yes, we do. You got to prove your fanhood. In the final scene, we see the gang drop the pickpocket out in the country. As he looks out the back window with a can of paint in his hands, Charlie sees the leprechaun ride a rainbow up into the sky, and he tells the rest of the gang about it. Dee replies, stop drinking paint, Charlie. And Charlie says, huh, and takes another drink of paint. Just an awesome final scene here. I thought it tied it all together. And it's one of those ones where it's open to interpretation, Magnum Mills. Gun to your Special Agent Johnson. Do you choose to believe that was a leprechaun?
Yeah.
Because I do as well.
Why not? I mean, how did they never explain? That's the one thing that I had a question about. Otherwise, how did that dude A, get into a locked basement? B, why did he go into a locked basement when he was busy stealing wallets upstairs and like stash the wallets upstairs, but then go into the locked basement? And then how does he get caught in a glue trap unless it's actually a leprechaun trap?
Yep.
So I'm on team is a leprechaun hashtag. Like, yeah, like really a leprechaun, whatever the hashtag was.
And this is one of those things with Charlie where there's only one person in the earth that's capable of pulling off catching a leprechaun, and it's Charlie Kelly. He's like, he couldn't complete a normal anything. He can't go to the grocery store and get all the items on the list, but he can catch a leprechaun, and he did.
That must have come from Shelly Kelly. So
Shelly Kelly himself must have painted it out there. Again, make sure you watch season 15 A Night Pod Cometh. We break down all that shit. You learn about Shelley Kelly.
Just what did you think when Matt comes? He just bangs right down in there, and he's covered in glitter. He's got the green undershirt or whatever. I mean, that was the happiest we'd seen Mac in a long time, right? I'm just saying.
He was extremely happy. He was calm. He wasn't accepting any questions, even though he'd love to answer them all. There was no time. There's no questions. But yeah, his hair was done up better. I mean,
he needed extra towels for some reason.
Yes. The one thing about comedy and the one thing about the gang, they take something like Mac being gay and they make it funny. In no way, shape, or form are we picking on gay people. Certainly supporters of friends.
Like whoever you want, as long as they're of age and consensual.
Yes, we're friends of the LGBT
of age
community.
And consensual. Those two things are very important. Outside of that, have fun.
Yes, absolutely. The gang figures out a way to make it funny, and it's not, they do it in a way that's witty. And so I give him credit for that. Again, Mac here, he's certainly at his happiest when I haven't seen him this happy since he was sleeping with
there's a couple
with the trans girl.
And there's a really, a couple of good lines at the end, especially right when they Dee and Dennis get back to the bar and they bitch about having to pay for the Uber surcharge because it's, it's St. Patty's Day and they're charging the surge for the holiday or whatever. Dee's like, oh yeah, I was saying that the whole time with the rideshare thing. And Dennis is like, no, you weren't. That was my idea. You gotta love, we mentioned it earlier, but Dennis is he's just never going to let Dee, have her moment in the sun, no matter what. And then finally, when they steal, they decide, all right, well, we got the wallets from the pickpockets. We got the wallets from the Paddys Wagon. We're going to, just this year, to make up our losses, we're going to keep them, but we're not going to make it a tradition. As soon as they said that, I'm like, oh boy, I want a future episode set like a couple of years from now where it's all about how now on St. Patty's Day, all they do is figure out how they're going to steal everyone's wallets. So I'd really like to see that episode.
And it may happen. It may happen. Magnum Mills, before we move on, anything else you want to talk about here that you really liked that we didn't cover? Likes, dislikes, anything like that?
I think one of the main things was just that this was finally one of the few episodes where like Dee was really right and it didn't matter. But she was right the whole time. She was on the right track. Everyone even really admitted that she was, and it doesn't matter because Dee's a bird.
Dee is a bird. All right, Magnum Mills, it is time right here on the Night Pod Cometh to hand out some hardware. Let's start with our favorite piece of dialogue from the episode. I'm going to go first here. For me, it was Charlie when he's first bringing Mac down into the basement and showing him the leprechaun. And Mac's kind of getting scared here that they're going to get the shit suit out of him because he's kidnapped a little person. And Charlie looked at him and said, kidnapped? No, captured. You wouldn't say you kidnapped Bigfoot. You would say you captured Bigfoot. I have captured a leprechaun here, Mac. And that to me it was just fantastic. Charlie at an all-time high, and he carried that energy through this entire episode. I love an episode where Charlie is the dude and he delivers, and this is certainly one of them. But yeah, my favorite quote of the episode.
Yeah, Charlie had a bunch of good ones. And like even those scenes with Mac would usually pretty much give Charlie the setup line and Charlie would get the good one. I would say I'll probably go with the exchange in the front of the Paddys Wagon after they get rid of the first customers, where Dee says, hey, did we just kidnap and rob those guys? And Frank says, oh, we just drove the snakes out of Philly the way that St. Patrick did. And then Dennis says, so what you're saying is technically we gave those guys a very authentic St. Patty's Day experience. That just felt like pure gang right there. Like that's the Austin Powers in a nutshell. Like that's the gang. That's exactly, did a whole bunch of horrible things and then immediately rationalize why it was all okay. So, and that brings us to what I'd say is either our favorite scene or moment of the episode. I went back and forth a little bit on this one, but my main one is what you had kind of talked about, is that there were the two main scenes. It's basically one scene that's split in half with Charlie, Mac talking about what to do with the little person they've trapped in the basement. The whole thing is just gold. No need to go over it a lot more other than, basically, like I said, it was one scene that was just split up into two parts. Connie is one unit, and it was just gold, Jerry. Gold.
pure gold, some would say, Magnum Mills. My favorite scene was, I got to say, my runner-up was Mac trying to figure out the metaphors and then coming to the conclusion that he needed to go to Rainbows, the gay bar down the road, alone. I will go alone. That to me was a great scene, super funny. But I got to give it up to Charlie Kelly doing the Reservoir Dog torture scene. Was stuck in the middle playing, super duper awesome. Huge fan of Reservoir Dogs, and as a result, that makes its way to my favorite scene of this episode.
Perfect. And that brings us to, this is the big time because we have to figure out who our 5-star man or woman is. What we're going to do is we're going to take our 5 members of the gang. We're going to rank them from 1 star being the worst to the 5-star man being the best. Jamie G, I will start here. And I will say that my 1-star man of this episode is none other than Dennis Reynolds, because no matter what his plan was, there's no fucking way it worked. Whether it was to get women to stalk, get women to get laid, actually make money for Paddys, none of it worked. He had the least amount of fun, was just frustrated the whole time. So Dennis Reynolds is my 1-star man here. Who's your 1-star man, Jamie G?
Well, Magnum Mills, I'm going to differ just a smidge here. My 1-star man in this episode was Frank Reynolds, only because he was grossly underused, and I understand why. Wish I could have got more Frank. When we saw Frank, he was great, just didn't get enough of him, and essentially he was just, him being the driver just basically demoted him to being out of this episode for the most part. So Frank is my 1-star man, Magnum Mills.
That makes sense. He's my 2-star man. Again, not given a lot to do, and I think the main fault is he's shitty at driving, but that's not it on him. Dennis made him drive, which is part of the reason I think Dennis is for shit here. Why I gave my 1. Who's your 2-star man, Jamie G?
My 2-star man is my guy, Dennis Reynolds. I gave him the 2nd star because he's featured more in this episode. I also thought he did a fantastic job in the cold open before we get the title in the credits. And I love Dennis, and as creepy and as bad as he was, you can't have this episode without him. I could argue you could have this episode without Frank. And so therefore he got my number 2-star man.
Yeah, I can make you, other than like keep it light, bitch, Frank only gets a couple of lines here, and yeah, he probably could be replaced. My 3-star man is Mac. He really did seem to have a good time at the Rainbow. He did find the wallets that were hidden with towels, but I got to dock him a lot for using the Irish honor system. Basically, they took their most profitable day of the year. It made nothing. I'm assuming the people even robbed the damn cash register. So they're at like negative money on their biggest night of the day because Mac picked the Irish honor system. He's only not last because he had such a good time and embraced his true self at the Rainbow.
He did embrace his true self, Magnum Mills. This was tough for me only because I feel, Mac, D, and Charlie, I think all had great episodes here. Mac was really dialed in with Charlie. Their dialogue, particularly in the basement, and when he comes back from the gay bar, and then also at the beginning when they're arguing over, if St. Patty was a confusing Pied Piper and a diddler. So I thought that was really funny. But I got to give my 3-star man to Mac, only because the other 2 people I think were better. But Mac was really dialed in here, man. This is a great episode for Mac.
Yeah, and my 4-star will be a woman. I'm going to give it up to D. Reynolds because the entire time she was right that they should have just done a rideshare thing. That would have been totally cool. But the problem is she took that rightness and kind of messed it up by just doing a bunch of D shit the rest of the time. But for actually being the person who was the most right about the whole thing, she gets a lot of points, but not enough to be my 5-star person. So she is my 4-star woman. Jamie G, who's your 4-star person?
Magnum Mills, I am going to follow suit here, and D is also my 4-star woman. I thought she was fantastic in this episode. Great D episode. She really carries the bulk majority of the Paddys Wagon storyline, in my opinion. She's just fantastic here. I love when they let D do all this different shit. And to your point, she finally was right. And it's nice when that happens with D. So she just didn't do enough, and that's no fault of hers, to get that 5-star man, but she is a 4-star woman on this particular episode.
So I'm assuming you're giving it up to Charlie as your 5-star man. Tell me why.
Nope, I'm actually going the Leprechaun. No, I'm just kidding. I am going Charlie with my 5-star man. No doubt about it, dude. He is incredible. Rewatching this again, I was like, shit, man, this isn't exactly Charlie work, but Charlie's fucking awesome in this episode, dude. Like, he crushes. Absolutely love it. He takes something insane like drinking paint and makes it super cool. I believed him throughout because this is only some Charlie Kelly shit to be able to catch a leprechaun. And you just can't have this episode without him. He absolutely shines throughout the entire scene. Every scene he's in, he murders. And so shout out to Charlie Day here, man. He fucking kills in this episode.
Charlie is also my 5-star person, man, here. Same kind of shit. Obviously Charlie Day kills all the time, but a little more specifically, I have him as a big winner here because he did some shit here. He drank some paint, which he apparently enjoys doing. We've seen him talking about, various liquids and glues and drinking and eating of colors. And he accomplished his lifelong dream of catching a leprechaun. And when he accomplished his lifelong dream, he actually managed to solve a big problem that Paddys had with the pickpocket that was costing them a lot of money on their most profitable day of the year. So whether or not he meant to, Charlie actually saved the day, kind of. So he has to be the 5-star man for me here.
Cannot say no to that. Now,
honorable mention, I will say, and we probably would both agree on it, but I think the dynamic duo here is Charlie and Mac, right? Like their scenes together, like that, they're the best pairing of the episode.
Absolutely. I think just given the storyline and Dennis really going super creep on this one, you couldn't really get that out of Dennis and Dee this time.
Every Mac and Charlie scene was great. I think all of them, they were all fucking great. So
they were fantastic.
I think definitely they're the, they got that Adam West, that little Batman and Robin, they're the dynamic duo here. So put that
100% they are Magnum Mills. It is that time of the episode, my dude, where we get our wallets out and we grade this thing. We're going to grade it on a scale of 0 to 100 Paddys bucks, with 100 being the absolute best. I will go first, Magnum Mills, and I am going to go with 92 Paddys bucks. This thing is way up there for me. I can't give it 100, but it's definitely in the 90s. It feels like 92. That might not be enough cash. I mean, I'm stimulating our own economy here, but I might be short selling it a little bit, but I'm sticking with 92 Paddys bucks.
I was always going to be in the 90s here. For me, this comes in just a tick below the gang hits the slopes, which you always done in season 11, because I think that does a little bit better job of giving everybody in the gang something to do, and the storylines come together a little bit more. Here it's just kind of the wallet thing, but 95, dude, it's still way up there. I was trying to split it between 94, 96, 9.5, 95, all them good things. Almost all the Paddys dollars, they're all going out there in circulation, coming back and creating the self-stimulating economy that we need to keep the Night Pod coming.
Oh, and coming it will. Magnum Mills, I know we're a little late for St. Paddy's Day, but I got to tell you, dude, this was a ton of fun to watch this episode and break it down right here on the Night Pod Cometh. This was the shiznat, to quote the dude, Snoop Dogg. And Magnum Mills, I'm looking forward to I guess checking out the rest of season 11 here, man. I mean, I'm not sure exactly when we decided to do season 11, but fuck it, I'm down. Tell these people where they can find all of our free content, not just the Night Pod Cometh, but all of the amazing shit we do for free. And I think I forgot to tell you that it's for free. Thanks again for checking us out, liking, subscribing, all that jazz. Really helps us out a lot. Magnum Mills, hit them with the contact.
All the things he said. Thank you very much. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you somehow find us randomly, just search for Night Pod Cometh. We're on social media at Night Pod Cometh. And if you have any comments, questions, anything else you'd like to send us, just send us an email at nightpodcometh@gmail.com. We're from the Joe Blow Football Show, who you can find at joeblowfootballshow.com and on social media at Joe Blow Show. We also do fantasy football, DFS, Dynasty football, all sorts of fun stuff on our fantasy football podcast, Seize the Gap FF. Find that by searching for Seize the Gap Fantasy on your favorite podcast joint and on social media at Seize the Gap FF. And there's only 2 episodes left, but we are covering the 6th and final season of the show Peaky Blinders. You can find that by searching for PBP, Peaky Blinders, on your favorite podcast platform and on social media at Peaky Podcast. I'm Magnum Mills. He's Jamie G. This has been the Night Pod Cometh. And remember, we need you to be a fighter for the Night Pod Cometh. Oh,
Champion of the sun.
oh. Technically, we're the Night Pod, so we can't be the champion of the sun. We're night, you know.
Yeah, we're Night Pod. Fighter of the day pod, dude.
Man, we are the fighter fucking day pod, dude.
This has been the Night Pod Cometh, presented by the Joe Blow Football Show. We are in no way associated with It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, 3 Arts Entertainment, RCG Productions, FXP, or FXX. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Any views or opinions expressed here are personal and do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations who may or may not be associated with the Joe Blow Football Show. If you have any questions, please contact us at nightpodcometh@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. Please remember to like, subscribe, and comment.